If we know nothing about Greek decorative painting, then in the field of ceramics, we have extensive information, because thousands of various vessels have come down to us. The first examples of Greek ceramics became known to us from the excavations of the necropolis in Etruria. These excavations yielded a large amount of ancient pottery, and therefore all Greek vases were called Etruscans for some time. Then hundreds of vases were found in Greece, on the islands, and in the areas which Greece traded, mainly in Italy, where the Etruscans lived, and in Crimea, where the Scythians lived. The abundance of Greek pottery is due to its unusually wide distribution and use. Ceramic products were used for everyday needs, household dishes, containers for transporting and storing liquids, drinking bowls, bottles for oil, bottles for incense or ointments. The material for ceramics was red clay. Products were formed on a potter's wheel, dried, polished, painted, and finally, fired at a temperature of about 900 degrees. The pattern was applied with a black shiny varnish, which was obtained from a mixture of potash, ash, and clay fixed with vinegar. The high temperature had a different effect on the painted and unpainted parts of the vessel. There were two main types of vase painting technique that historically replaced each other. The black figure style, where the painting was done in black on a red clay background, and the red figure style, where the background was painted black and unpainted clay formed a decor. Terracotta amphora, jug, c. 540 to 530 BC. On the obverse, Hercules. On the reverse, Gerion. On the neck is a flutist leading a procession of men. One of the exploits of Hercules was to get the cows of the giant Gerion, who had 3 bodies, 3 heads, and 6 arms and legs. Gerion lived on an island far to the west, with his shepherd Eurytion and his dog Orthos. Here, Hercules aims an arrow at Gerion, one of whose bodies falls. This theme was popular in the 6th century BC. The vase is unique in its shape, wide and sharply tapering towards the bottom and lacking a stem. This is also one of the earliest cases where the main characters of the story are located on opposite sides of the body of the vessel. Another example from the museum's collection, terracotta amphora, jug, with lid and handle, c. 540 BC. On both sides of the vessel are depicted a man and woman in a chariot, accompanied by a woman and a musician. Among them are warriors engaged in battle. For several decades, red figure vase painting replaced the black figure vase painting that had dominated before. The red figure style got its name due to the characteristic correlation of colors between the figures and the background, which is directly opposite to the black figure style. The background is black, the figures are red. Black terracotta amphora, jug, c. 490 BC. On the outside, a young man is depicted singing and playing the cithara. On the reverse side, the judge. This work is a masterpiece of Greek vase painting because it combines many traits of Athenian culture in an artistic expression of the highest quality. The form itself plays a central role, with symmetry, scale, and lustrous glossy glaze on the front. It offers a carefully composed 3-dimensional surface that gives volume to the piece. The personality of the singer is determined by his instrument. The cithara, a type of lyre used in public performances, including recitations of epic poetry. The figure on the reverse side is identified by his robe and baton. While the situation is probably a competition, the subject is the music itself. Terracotta amphora, c. 530 BC, signed by Andachides. On the front side of the body, Hercules and Apollo compete for possession of the Delphic tripod, which was central to Apollo's oracle. Reverse, Dionysus, god of wine, between a satyr and a maenad. On the edge, obverse and reverse, Hercules and the Nemean lion. In some works that combine red figure and black figure imagery, one artist seems to have done both. Here, however, 2 different artists are likely. The scene on the obverse depicts the hero Hercules with his club and the god Apollo with a bow and arrow, fighting for the Delphic tripod, which Hercules was trying to carry away. White paint was rarely used. Other colors are even rarer. Some red clay vessels are painted with black lacquer and have no pattern, either painted or engraved. They are good for their strict and elegant form. One of the goblets kept in the Bibliothèque Nationale, Paris, is decorated with a magical image of eyes and combines 3 different techniques: engraved black lacquer, tinted with white and purple paint, a thin black drawing on an unpainted red background, black opaque chandelier. The forms of Greek poetry are extremely diverse. Most often there are about 20 species, but in total there are more than 350 species. We also mention figured vases in the form of people and animals. For example, 22, fragmentary terracotta Rhyton, vase for libations or drinking. C. 460 to 450 BC, remains of 2 figures. The fondness for vases in figured form continued throughout the 5th century BC. In the middle of the century, the workshop of the artist Sotates was the most active and creative source. While vases with heads, sometimes with 2 joined heads, were popular in the 490s and 480s, the next generation of artists introduced the idea of combing the heads of different animals, in this case a donkey and a ram. The painted scene probably depicted a satyr and a maenad. Terracotta vase in the shape of a lobster claw, c. 460 BC. So many aspects of Greek life depended on the sea, the lobster claw vase is not surprising. However, this is an exception and may be a variant of the askos, an oil container. The Dionysian iconography of the lobster claw suggests that it was a novelty used at symposiums, drunken parties. In our time, we are accustomed to attach great importance to the personality of the artist, and attempts have been made to find out the names of the authors of Greek ceramics. In a number of cases, this proved to be easy, since some items are signed. We find inscriptions of various types. Sometimes the name of a potter or the name of an artist is indicated. Sometimes both authors are credited. But often there is nothing left of the artists, and the works themselves speak of their creators. Some vessels do not have any decor, and their artistic merit depends solely on the harmony of the form. All aspects of the life of the Greeks were reflected in vase painting. Images of people prevailed among the motifs. On pottery, we find living rooms, furniture known to us only from these images, household utensils, the work of men, their recreation and games, the work of women, pictures of raising children, battles, figurines of warriors, including 12, funeral rites. Along with scenes of everyday life, we find plots of epic poetry, the Iliad and the Odyssey, lyrics, comedies, images of buildings, statues, frescoes, scenes of playing musical instruments, dances, mythological and ritual scenes. Their whole life passes before us, sometimes presented with the utmost frankness, so that on the vases you can find a picture of a drinking bout and other plots taken from life. What united the Greek cities? In all 700 policies they spoke Greek. They had a common culture. There is no Athenian culture, there is no Spartan culture, there is Greek culture. Therefore, Homer was read everywhere. All literature, wherever it was produced, was general Greek literature. Architects built temples in the order system in all Greek policies. This was Greek architecture. Within the walls of the museum, we will encounter a grandiose exhibit. Marble column from the Temple of Artemis at Sardis, c. 300 BC. A portion of the fluted Ionic column in the center of the hall rose to over 58 feet in its original position in the Temple of the Artemis. The exquisite leaf carving on the capitals is unique among the surviving temple capitals, and the torus, leaf base, with a pattern in the form of plant scales, is also exceptionally complex. This capital is slightly smaller than others found on the site, indicating that it does not belong to the outer colonnade. Temples were decorated not only with columns, but also with sculpture. Sculptors created their wonderful works, and they differed only in skill. Marble statue of a Kouros, youth, c. 590 to 580 BC. This is one of the earliest marble statues of the human figure carved in Attica. The rigid stance with the left foot forward and the arms at the sides is borrowed from Egyptian art. Pose was a clear, simple formula used by Greek sculptors throughout the 6th century BC. This early figure is dominated by almost abstract geometric forms, and anatomical details are presented in beautiful similar patterns. The statue adorned the grave of a young Athenian aristocrat. If the ancient Egyptians prepared the body of the deceased for the other world through mummification and built for him a funerary pyramid or mastaba, often more significant than a house, then the ancient Greeks followed other principles. The ancient cultural tradition treated death as an evil, but at the same time, people clearly understood that immortality was given to the gods and heroes close to them, like Hercules. The ancient Greeks surrounded death with a large number of rituals and myths about the afterlife. Among the most famous rituals are the obligatory 2 coins placed over the eyes, so that there is something to pay Charon when he transports the soul across the river Styx. The underworld was not divided only into heaven and hell. The ancient Greeks came up with a more interesting system. The Greeks had 2 forms of funeral rites. One of them involved burying the body in the ground, the other burning it at the stake. In the case of cremation, the ashes were placed in an urn, which was either buried in the ground or placed in a tomb. Gravestones were erected over the burial. Marble stele tombstone of a young man and a little girl, c. 530 BC. It is the most complete tombstone of this type that has survived from the Archaic period. The fragments were acquired by the Metropolitan Museum of Art in different years. The fragment with the head of a girl, here a plaster copy, was acquired in 1903 by the Berlin Museums. A fragment of the right forearm of a young man, here also in plaster, is in the National Museum in Athens. The young man on the pole is depicted as an athlete with an arybalos, oil flask, suspended from his wrist. Athletics was an important part of every boy's education, and the oil was used as a post-workout cleanser. He is holding a pomegranate, a fruit associated with both fertility and death in Greek myths, possibly indicating that he reached puberty before his death. A little girl, presumably the younger sister, is holding a flower. This exceedingly sumptuous monument, over 13 feet high, must have been erected by one of the wealthiest aristocratic families. Another tomb stele with a family group of ca. 360 BC. Because the framing niche that once surrounded this relief is missing, there are no inscriptions that could identify the deceased. Both the seated man and the veiled woman behind him look straight, as if the young woman who looks down on them is invisible. Do they mourn their dead daughter? Does she mourn her dead father? Or is she the only survivor of the group? Despite its ambiguity and the solemn sadness, the relief conveys a tense, albeit restrained, feeling of family unity. Carved by a master craftsman, this funerary stele is one of the most significant specimens to have survived from the classical period. It is always sad to look at the burials of children. Marble gravestone of a little girl, c. 450 to 440 BC. The tender seriousness of this child is beautifully expressed in her sweet farewell to her beloved pigeons. Her peplos is unbuttoned and swings open at the table, and the folds of the drapery clearly show her posture. Many of the most skilled stone carvers came from the Cyclades where marble was plentiful. The sculptor of this stele may have been one of the artists invited to Athens in the 3rd quarter of the 5th century BC to decorate the Parthenon. Ancient Greece gave us the idea of an ideal person. Everything in a person should be perfect. The correct Greek features of the Hellenes are beautiful and almost perfect. According to Pliny the Elder, an ancient Roman writer and polymath, the Greeks depicted people not as they are, but as they appear to our senses. Any depiction of a person must comply with the canon of Polycletus. What does this canon teach? Primary symmetry of a living body. The beauty lies in the symmetry of the parts. For example, in the symmetry of a finger with a finger, a hand with a hand, an elbow with an elbow, and then all the parts with each other. Polycletus confirmed his word with deeds by creating a statue in accordance with the instructions of his teaching, and as is known, he called both this statue of his and this composition canon. The beauty of the body lies in the symmetry of the parts. The museum collection contains fragments of a marble statue of Diadumenos, a young man tying a bandage around his head. C. 69 to 96 AD, copy of a work attributed to Polycletus. The head, arms and legs below the knees, and the tree trunk are ancient. The rest of the figure is a cast from a marble copy found at Delos and now kept in the National Museum in Athens. This statue represents a young man adorning his head with a bandage after winning an athletic contest. The original sculpture in bronze probably stood in a sanctuary, such as at Olympia or Delphi, where games were regularly held. The Greek sculptor Polycletus of Argos, active in the middle of the 5th century BC, was one of the most famous artists of the ancient world. His figures are carefully designed with particular attention to body proportions and posture. The chest and the pelvis of the figure are tilted in opposite directions, creating rhythmic contrast in the torso, creating the impression of organic vitality. The position of the feet, the balance between standing and walking, gives a sense of potential movement. This strictly calculated pose is found in almost all of the works attributed to Polykleitos. Another interesting sculpture is the marble statue of a wounded Amazon from the 1st to 2nd century AD, Roman copy. The lower legs and feet have been restored from casts, taken from copies in Berlin and Copenhagen. Most of the right arm, the lower part of the column, and the plinth are marble restorations from the 18th century. In Greek art, the Amazons, a mythical race of female warriors from Asia Minor, were often depicted fighting heroes such as Hercules, Achilles, and Theseus. This statue represents a refugee from the battle who has lost her weapon and is bleeding from a wound under her right breast. Her tunic is unbuttoned at one shoulder and girded at the waist with her horse's makeshift bridle. Despite her plight, her face shows no sign of pain or fatigue. She leans lightly on a pillar to her left and gracefully places her right hand on her head in a gesture often used to signify sleep or death. Such emotional restraint was characteristic of the classical art of the second half of the 5th century BC. The original statue probably stood in the grounds of the great temple of Artemis at Ephesus on the coast of Asia Minor, where the Amazons had legendary and cult connections with the goddess. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder described a competition held in the middle of the 5th century BC between 5 famous sculptors, including Phidias, Polycletus, and Chrysalis, who were to make a statue of an Amazon for the temple. This type of statue is commonly associated with this competition. And one more warrior from the Greek culture and the museum's collection. Marble statue of a wounded warrior, c. 138 to 181 NE. Copy of a Greek bronze statue, c. 460 to 450 BC. The object of this statue is not precisely defined. The warrior holds a shield in his left hand, and probably a spear in his right hand, and he stands with his feet carefully planted on an incline. The figure must have some connection to the sea, because the board form, surrounded by waves, is carved on the plinth of the second copy in the British Museum in London. It has been suggested that this is a Greek hero who ignored the oracle's warning that the first Greek to set foot on Trojan soil would be the first to die in battle. This statue may depict him descending from the ship, ready to meet his fate. After the discovery of a wound carved in the right armpit, the figure was reimagined as a dying warrior and identified by the sculptor Chrysalis as a famous statue. A prominent representative of the classical Greek school was Lysippus. In essence, he was a direct follower of her, but, having accepted her traditions, he stepped further. Lysippus believed that the best and only teacher is nature. Not trusting the authority of the Polycleitos canon, he undertook an accurate study of nature. Before him, people were sculpted in accordance with the principles of the canon. That is, in full confidence. Then true beauty lies in the proportionality of all forms and in the proportion of people of average height. Lysippus preferred a tall, slender figure. His limbs became lighter, taller. His extraordinary fertility helped him to create up to 1,500 statues. The heyday of Lysippus's creativity falls in the period of the reign of Alexander the Great, 336 to 323 BC, whose court painter he was. The collection has only one exhibit of the sculptor. Marble torso of Eros, 1st or 2nd century AD. Copy of a Greek statue from the 4th century BC, attributed to Lysippus. With a monumentary gesture, young Eros was shown drawing his bow. The figures of Lysippus are slender, long-legged, and small-headed. Their proportions are easy. Here is how Lysippus himself defined the difference between the ideal of Polycletus and his canon. Polycletus portrayed people as they really are, and I as they seem. Unfortunately, there are no sculptural images of Alexander the Great in the museum's collection, but there is a gold stater from approximately 323/2 to 315 BCE. Gold coins of this type were minted for more than 40 years at the two main royal mints in Macedonia, Pella and Amphipolis. The trident and details of horse legs on this coin indicate that it was minted in Amphipolis immediately after the death of Alexander the Great. Greece became famous not only for culture, but also for the art of warfare. The ancient Greek hoplite warriors were heavy infantry armed with heavy, about 8 kilograms, round Argive shields called hoplon, which protected the warrior from neck to knees. The first hoplite warriors appeared in the Spartan army. Citizens with average incomes became hoplites during the war. They could provide themselves with weapons and equipment at their own expense. The best armies of the Greek policies consisted of wealthy citizens, heavily armed hoplite infantrymen united in phalanxes. The main element of the equipment is the helmet of the beginning of the 5th century BC. This helmet and the pair of greaves, shins, or knee-meds that complement it are among the key elements of the armor, a set of offensive and defensive weapons that a Greek warrior would use in battle. Full armor usually also included a spear, shield, and sword. The helmet dates from the late Archaic period, c. 700 to 480 BC, and is a late example of the type now commonly known as the Corinthian, which was popular in Greece and in territories colonized by or in regular contact with the Greeks. Among the many surviving examples of the Corinthian type, it is distinguished by the elliptical shape of the holes for the eyes and the presence of cutouts for the ears. The greaves are distinguished by skillful modeling of anatomical details and the rejection of any other forms of ornamentation. The next helmet in the collection is a bronze helmet of the South Italian Corinthian type, mid-4th to mid-3rd century BC. These helmets are South Italian adaptations of the Greek type known as the Corinthian. The general shape is more open at the bottom, and the articulation of the face includes pronounced ridges above the eyes and at the hairline. The specimen with a plume also has a poorly traced ornament and the figure of a horse, slightly different design bronze helmet of the Apulian Corinthian type. These helmets are South Italian adaptations of the Greek type known as the Corinthian. The general shape is more open at the bottom, and the articulation of the face includes pronounced ridges from the eyes and at the hairline. Bronze cuirass, body armor, 4th century BC. The cuirass was another main element of the armor of the Greek warrior. This one is significantly later than most of the items in this gallery, as indicated by its articulation. It also illustrates how much body armor has in common with sculpture. The front and back plates of the cuirass usually provide accurate visualization of the male torso. Men fight and women decorate this world. And where there is a woman, there are jewelry. Jewelry in Greece has reached significant heights. The country was poor in gold, but it came in exchange for other goods and was always highly valued. Greek art, including jewelry, is considered the cradle of European artistic culture. It is characterized, first of all, by a humanistic worldview, which is confirmed by the predominance of human images. It was in ancient Greece that the main artistic constructive principles were formed and formulated: harmony, rhythm, organic ideas and forms. The Metropolitan has an impressive collection of jewelry items, and probably the largest is a collection of earrings. Gold disc earrings with boat-shaped pendant, c. 300 BC. A tiny figurine of Nike, personification of victory, driving 2 horses, sits amid a floral design above the boat-shaped molds on these extraordinarily intricate earrings. Spiral earring made of an alloy of gold and copper, with a tip in the form of the head of a lion and a griffin, first half of the 4th century BC. The eyes and rosettes were originally inlaid with colored enamel, and the gold workmanship is of very high quality. The spirals themselves are made of copper alloy rods, covered with a thin sheet of gold. Golden earring mid-4th century BC. From this earring hangs a siren, half bird and half woman, playing a cithara. Pair of gold earrings with arrow's pendant, 3rd to 1st century BC. Gold earring with sphinx, 4th to 3rd century BC. Gold disc earring with a female head and cone pendants. This group of ornaments is said to have been found in a tomb of Matados. The gold diadem is richly chased with an intricate floral pattern. Dionysus, god of wine, and his wife Ariadne are seated in the center. Muses playing musical instruments sit among the vines and on the sides. A tiny figurine of a playing a lyre also appears just above the crescent shape on each of the boat-shaped earrings. Jewelry of Ganymede, c. 330 to 300 AD BC. Items from this group are said to have been found together in Macedonia, near Thessaloniki, before 1913. The collection forms an impressive set: earrings, necklace, brooches or pins, bracelets, and a ring. Magnificent gold earrings dated to about 330 to 300 BC consist of a large honeysuckle palmate, under which hangs an elaborate 3-dimensional figure of the Trojan prince, Ganymede, in the claws of Zeus, who has taken the form of an eagle. Zeus desired Ganymede for his beauty and carried him to Mount Olympus to become the butler of the gods. Pendants are sculptural masterpieces in miniature. The hoops of the rock crystal bracelets, c. 330 to 300 BC, were carefully carved and polished to give them a twisted look, accentuated by the wire bindings inserted into the hollows. Skillfully executed heads of rams. The scallop setting of the gold ring is adorned with a beautiful cabochon emerald, but with flaws. Emeralds first appeared in jewelry during this time and were probably mined in the eastern Egyptian desert, although it is possible that some were brought from the Ural Mountains. Gold armband with Hercules knot, 3rd to 2nd century BC. The Hercules knot on this luxurious headband is decorated with floral designs and inlaid with garnets, emeralds, and enamel. According to the Roman writer Pliny, the decorative device of the Hercules knot could heal wounds, and its popularity in Hellenistic jewelry suggests it was believed to have the power to ward off evil. Golden Fail, libation bow, 4th to 3rd century BC. Decorated with bees, acorns, and beech nuts, this libation bowl was made using the repoussé method. Acorn decorations appeared at the end of the 6th century BC and must have been traditional. We say goodbye to ancient Greece, but we will return to its culture. From the 2nd century BC, cultural forces are concentrated in Rome, and Roman art, absorbing the achievements of the previous period, marks a new rise, the last stage in the development of ancient art.